Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. The words strike like a whisper from the depths of your own mind. A warning. A prophecy. A mirror. But then, another voice cuts through the silence, cold, sharp, and ruthless. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Niccolò Machiavelli. Two worlds collide. One speaks of inner mastery, the other of outer domination. You stand between them. Between the shadow Jung warns you to confront, and the political cunning Machiavelli urges you to wield. Which will guide your hand? Which will consume you? This is no abstract debate. It is the question that has shaped kings and tyrants, saints and conquerors, visionaries and destroyers. It is the question shaping you, every time you hide a desire, suppress a rage, or justify a manipulation. Jung believed the most dangerous enemy was within. The shadow, your unknown impulses, your rejected instincts, your buried fears, waits like a predator in the dark corridors of your mind. If ignored, it leaks into the world. It twists into envy, deceit, hunger for power. It becomes the thing you swear you are not. Machiavelli, on the other hand, did not flinch from the darkness. He sharpened it into strategy. He saw morality as a luxury and survival as law. His world was one of courts and conspiracies, of betrayal and sudden strikes. To play naive was to invite ruin. To play noble without strength was to die. And so, the great question stands, should you master your inner darkness? Or should you sharpen it into a weapon before someone else does? This is not a safe question. It cuts into the fabric of who you think you are. It forces you to ask, what is more dangerous? Uncontrolled impulses hidden beneath virtue, or controlled ruthlessness hidden beneath charm? You are about to enter a world where psychology meets power, where philosophy bleeds into politics, where the choices of the mind ripple across the fate of empires, and the soul of a single person. This is legend's legacy, where history's most dangerous ideas are brought to life, where you walk the thin line between wisdom and ruin, insight and obsession, shadow and light. Stay to the end, and you will see the paradox revealed, how Jung and Machiavelli, though seemingly opposed, may be speaking the same dark truth, but from different angles of the same abyss. The gates are open. The torchlight flickers against the stone walls. You hear two voices echoing in the dark, one whispering of inner mastery, the other of ruthless strategy. Which will you follow? Which will follow you? The next will take you into the heart of the problem, the hidden psychological trap that has ensnared leaders, thinkers, and you. Far more than you dare admit. Your shadow is not evil, but it is dangerous. Jung tells you this with the calm certainty of a man who has seen what happens when the unconscious erupts into the world. The shadow holds everything you deny. Your suppressed rage. Your forbidden desires. Your hunger for recognition. Your thirst for control. Each time you say, "I'm not like that," the shadow grows darker, thicker, heavier. Not because you have defeated it, but because you have buried it alive. And what is buried seeks escape. Jung warns, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. This is not philosophy. It is psychology sharpened into prophecy. The unexamined mind leaks. First in subtle ways, a bitter remark, a manipulative smile, a hidden resentment that poisons your decisions. Then in catastrophic ways, as betrayal, as corruption, as the slow collapse of integrity until only an empty mask remains. Machiavelli would not disagree, but his answer cuts in the opposite direction. He saw human nature not as a mystery to heal, but as a weapon to wield. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. He did not ask you to transcend your shadow. He asked you to understand it, harness it, turn it into cunning. Where Jung says, own your impulses before they own you. Machiavelli says, use your impulses before someone else uses theirs against you. But here lies the hidden problem. If you mistake repression for virtue, your shadow will sabotage you. If you mistake cunning for wisdom, your power will corrupt you. History is littered with examples. Monarchs who preached virtue but ruled with cruelty. Revolutionaries who began with ideals but ended with tyranny. Leaders who believed they were masters of their darkness, until their darkness mastered them. Psychology calls this the moral masking effect. The brain hides forbidden impulses behind the veil of righteousness. You justify manipulation as strategy. You justify cruelty as justice. You justify fear as loyalty. Jung would call this self-deception. Machiavelli would call it survival. But both agree, power and shadow cannot be separated. They feed each other. They shape your destiny whether you admit it or not. This is why the great minds of history obsess over one question: who controls whom? Your shadow is not just personal. It is collective. It shapes nations, ideologies, wars. It seeps into law, religion, politics, art. Every time a society represses its darker truths, it bursts the very tyrannies it fears. Carl Jung warned, "The greatest danger to man is the abyss in himself." And Machiavelli? He would nod, then whisper, "Yes. But the abyss can also be your throne." Now the stage is set. You see the roots of the problem, deep in the human mind, deeper in history, and deeper still in the shadow of every decision you make. But what happens when this darkness spills over? When unconscious impulses and raw power mix like oil and fire? The answer is waiting for you. The consequences are not theoretical. They are living. They are here. You believe you are in control, but the evidence says otherwise. Every suppressed impulse leaks. Every unexamined motive slips through the cracks of your decisions. What you bury does not disappear, it mutates. Jung warns, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When you refuse to face your own darkness, you don't escape it. You disguise it. You wrap it in ambition, in morality, in strategy. But beneath the polished surface, it still pulls the strings. And then it spreads, from the individual to the collective, from the mind to the marketplace, from the hidden corners of your heart to the gilded halls of power. The result? Nations ruled by fear rather than vision. Leaders who cloak their hunger for dominance in the language of justice. Societies that mistake submission for order and propaganda for truth. History repeats itself because human nature repeats itself. When shadows are ignored, they rise like specters over entire civilizations. The French Revolution began with dreams of liberty. It ended with guillotines, mass hysteria, and blood-soaked streets. Why? Because the shadow of vengeance was never confronted. It merely dressed itself as justice until it devoured its own creators. Machiavelli would argue this was inevitable. "He who builds on the people builds on the mud," he wrote. Human nature, he believed, is fickle, selfish, driven by fear. Control it, or be crushed by it. But here lies the trap. Control becomes compulsion. Power becomes paranoia. And paranoia turns rulers into prisoners of their own strategies. This is the unseen consequence. Your shadow does not just control your actions. It controls your perception. It blinds you to your own corruption while making you believe you are righteous. Cognitive science confirms it. The human brain filters reality through biases: confirmation bias, moral licensing, self-serving narratives. You see what preserves your identity, not what reveals your truth. This is why empires fall. Not from outside invasions, but from inner decay. Not from lack of strength, but from lack of self-awareness. And yet, this is not just history's problem. It is yours. Every unspoken resentment. Every hidden insecurity. Every small act of manipulation you justify as necessary. They accumulate. They shape your relationships, your career, your sense of self. Until one day, you no longer know whether you are making choices, or whether your shadow is making them for you. The crowd in the mind grows louder. Jung whispers, "Face it, or be consumed by it." Machiavelli counters. Use it or be used by others. Neither voice offers comfort. Both demand courage. Because the cost of ignorance is not just moral, it is existential. You risk becoming the very thing you fear. A puppet of unconscious forces. A strategist trapped in his own web. A life ruled by hidden compulsions, mistaken for destiny. But what if there is another way? Not repression. Not blind cunning. But a rebellion of consciousness. A radical act of claiming what lurks in the dark and turning it into strength. That path lies ahead. But first, you must ask yourself, how much of your life is truly yours? And how much is already the shadows? Rebellion does not begin with revolution. It begins with recognition. Jung insists the first act of freedom is brutal honesty. Not with the world. With yourself. He says, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is not poetic. It is surgical. It means facing the parts of yourself you are terrified to admit exist, the envy you hide behind politeness, the rage you disguise as principle, the hunger for control you justify as leadership. To rebel is to step into that darkness and claim it, not as an excuse, not as a weapon, but as raw energy waiting for direction. But Jung does not stop there. Owning your shadow is only the beginning. The deeper task is to integrate it, to transform instinct into insight, chaos into creation. Machiavelli would nod, but his lesson sharpens the edge. He warns, a prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promise. To him, morality without strategy is suicide. Power is fragile. And those who refuse to see the darker forces at play are destined to be pawns. So how do you rebel without becoming corrupt? How do you wield darkness without being consumed by it? History offers clues. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome not with cruelty, but with stoic discipline. He knew his shadow, his temper, his pride, his fear of betrayal, yet he refused to let it rule him. His private journals reveal his method: self-reflection, self-command, relentless questioning of motives. Queen Elizabeth I played Machiavelli's game, but with brilliance. She balanced charm with calculation, diplomacy with deception, yet never let paranoia hollow her spirit. Her rebellion was not against darkness itself, but against being enslaved by it. What do they teach? That rebellion is not about denying your shadow. It is about becoming its master. This demands tools, mental weapons forged from philosophy, psychology, and self-discipline. 1. Radical self-awareness, journaling, meditation, questioning your own motives. Jungian work begins with asking, what am I pretending not to know about myself? 2. Strategic detachment, seeing human nature as Machiavelli saw it, not cynically, but clearly. People act from fear, desire, pride. So do you. Recognize the game. Do not play blind. 3. Ethical power, not naive morality, but principled cunning. Choosing when to be fierce, when to be kind, when to act with mercy, and when to strike with precision. 4. Shadow transformation, turning anger into courage, envy into ambition, fear into foresight. Jung would call this individuation, becoming whole. This is the rebellion, to refuse both naive virtue and blind ruthlessness. To walk the razor's edge between inner mastery and outer strategy. To use your shadow, not as a weapon of corruption, but as fuel for growth, vision, and unshakable strength. But one question remains. If you master the shadow, if you balance Jung's depth with Machiavelli's cunning, what truth do you finally uncover? A truth that may change everything you thought you knew about yourself, and about power itself. At the end of the labyrinth, one truth waits, and it does not comfort you. The shadow was never your enemy. Neither was power. The true enemy was unconsciousness. Jung whispers across time. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This was never about good or evil. It was about awareness. About refusing to let hidden drives define who you become. Machiavelli, standing at the other side of the abyss, offers his final word. Whosoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times. But now, you hear him differently. He is not only speaking of politics. He is speaking of the mind. Of adapting, integrating, evolving. And so the final realization dawns: the shadow is not to be feared. It is to be forged. Power is not to be rejected. It is to be refined. The synthesis of Jung and Machiavelli reveals this. Inner mastery and outer strategy are not enemies. They are twin disciplines. One prevents you from being consumed by darkness. The other prevents you from being crushed by the world. This is the ultimate truth: to own yourself so completely that neither your fears nor the fears of others dictate your fate. And yet, a question lingers: who are you without your mask? Without your carefully built identity? Without the excuses you've whispered to yourself about why you play small, why you hide, why you scheme? Silence answers. And in that silence, you feel the weight of choice. You can continue as before, half conscious, half controlled, half alive. Or you can step into the shadow. Not to be ruled by it, but to claim it. Shape it. Turn it into strength. This is not theory. It is practice. Daily. Relentless. Unforgiving. For in the end, the greatest legacy is not the empire you build. It is the self you forge, the self that cannot be bribed by comfort, shaken by fear, or seduced by false virtue. And so the voices of history fall silent. Jung and Machiavelli leave you with their final words, not as answers, but as warnings. Carl Jung. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Niccolò Machiavelli. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Now the debate passes to you. Which path will you take? Which ideology speaks to your soul? Which legacy will you leave? Share your thoughts below, and if this journey left its mark on you, subscribe to Legends Legacy, where history's greatest minds challenge yours. Because your shadow is waiting, and it will not wait forever.